thank everybody for joining and welcome everybody to Channel Ape's Thought Leadership webinar. Today's webinar is titled, What Does Section 321 Mean for Direct-to-Consumer Brands? We'll run through the agenda really quick, and then what we'll do is a quick round of introductions. I'm sure everybody can see my screen, so we'll jump right into the agenda for today. So we'll start off with some welcome and some introductions. I'll run through and I'll allow all the panelists here a few minutes to kind of introduce themselves and their companies. Then we're going to dive into what exactly is Section 321. We'll dive into that from a high level and kind of give a broad overview of the program. The next topic will be, what does Section 321 mean for brands? We'll review that and really get into some specifics with Dwayne here. And then the next topic will be the reverse flow for Section 321. And we'll have Jeff and Adam kind of help me out with that piece of it, how reverse logistics works for apparel, footwear, and direct-to-consumer brands. Then I'll run through a real-world example of some cost savings that we're seeing, some brands actually realize. And then we'll just do a high-level process review, how it works from importation until the customer gets that order, and then the reverse logistics flow as well. We'll kind of go with that, and then we left some time here at the end for some question and answer period. So to jump right into it, I want to introduce today's expert panel. I'll start with myself. My name is Jason DePetropaulo, and I'm the head of partnerships here at Channel Ape. My role at Channel Ape is really to build out the first ever Channel Ape partnership ecosystem. Our ecosystem is focusing on bringing together best-in-class 3PL providers with Channel Ape's flexible order management software. Our partner program is really built from the ground up and designed to bring about maximum value for our customers while creating opportunities for our 3PL partners. Next up, we have Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne is the Senior Director of Retail and E-commerce Strategy at SCI Group. SCI Group is Canada's leading logistics and supply chain provider. They're in business for over 30 years, and they handle over $1 billion in inventory daily for retail, technology, and healthcare customers. I love having Dwayne on the call today. He's also SCI's Group Section 321 advisor. He's my go-to for anything related to Section 321. Really helps brands and retailers understand the benefits of Section 321. Dwayne, anything else you'd like to share, on SCI and your background, a little bit more about SCI?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. What can 321 do for brands? And, pre-pandemic, we saw lots of activity around 321 because the agreement started, 1989, and through the pandemic. And as we all come out of the pandemic, it's probably a daily conversation with brands around the benefits. So I look forward to the discussion.
Awesome. And then today we also have both Jeff and Adam from Darnit. Darnit specializes in, and I love this category name, apparel crisis management. It kind of explains exactly what you guys do. And we've seen a lot of different crises with apparel and footwear brands over the years. So Darnit's a 25-year-old distribution and quality control business, providing door-to-door solutions, warehousing, and distribution services for retailers, manufacturers, and wholesalers. Some of the things that Darnit specializes in are label changes, QC control, refurbishment, apparel inspection, repair, dry cleaning, pressing. Really runs the gamut of probably anything you would see as an apparel and footwear brand as far as reverse logistics and returns. Jeff, Adam, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe a little bit more about Darnit and your capabilities?
Sure. Thanks for having us today. So Darnit, as Jason mentioned, is 25 years old. We started as a result of the NAFTA agreement being signed back in 1994, where a lot of the production went offshore. And when the production came back here to the States, customers of ours back then, when we were in the manufacturing business, came back to us and asked us to fix some of their problems. And we laughed at them because, they took all their productions down south to Mexico. But as it turns out, they had problems that needed to be fixed here in the States so they could get the product to market. Without correcting those problems or sending them back to Mexico to fix them, they were in a lot of trouble. So since then, since 1994, we've grown quite a bit. And we now do two things where we do distribution as well as doing the quality control piece. And we'll talk more about reverse logistics as part of both of those divisions later. How's that?
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jeff, for joining today. Adam, want to give a little bit about your background and your role at Darnit?
Yep, I am the warehouse manager here at Darnit. Well, right now with reverse logistics, we're pulling in customers' returns here in the States. We're quality control, make sure everything's perfect and ready to go out for the next customer that purchases it. And we can usually do that pretty quickly. And that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining today. So I want to jump right into what is Section 321. I'm sure everybody here that's joined has heard it. It's come up a lot recently, and really what it is it's a legislation that describes this concept as de minimis. And really what it is a de minimis shipment or a Section 321 shipment. It's a shipment that allows for goods valued at $800 or less to be imported duty-free into the United States. You probably heard a lot about it, and especially recently. And maybe you think it's something new, but actually the law's been around since 1930 in the United States. So what changed recently? I think there's a few things of what changed recently to make this a really popular concept. I think number one, back in 2016, the de minimis value increased from $200 to $800. So currently what that means is any shipment going to a US customer, as long as it's less than $800 in one day, is going to be duty free to that US customer. It makes it much more attractive to direct-to-consumer brands looking to make shipping from Canada or Mexico into the US duty-free. The increase in the de minimis, coupled with large increases on tariffs, mainly from Asian countries, allows Section 321 to really gain traction as a way for importers to save on costs. I think the second thing that changed, and we all know about this, is COVID, right? So what we saw was during COVID, it really greatly accelerated e-commerce purchases. More consumers were at home, not working, not wanting to go out, and we saw a lot more consumers shopping and buying things from their home. The COVID world really changed e-commerce and probably accelerated it a few years and really changed customers' buying habits. And I think the third thing is there's probably the Customs and Border Protection Agency, which is the agency that clears these shipments from Canada or Mexico into the US, has gotten a lot better at clearing these customs under Section 321. The whole process is automated. All the data gets sent ahead of time to CBP, which makes it a lot quicker for them to clear through customs. So you're no longer seeing delays. It's much more efficient, and it just makes the whole process really flow really fast. So it's really a competitive advantage for these direct-to-consumer brands. So high level, how does it work? Brands looking to reduce their duty liabilities can ship manufactured goods from Asia into either Canada or Mexico before shipping out these goods to US consumers. Duties and tariffs deferred as long as the import goods are eventually going to be shipped into the United States. Again, shipping to the US customers less than $800 a day remain duty free. And really, this strategy, we've seen it save brands millions of dollars off their bottom line. And the shopping experience, the end customer experience is no different really than if that order originated from the United States. So it's really become an attractive solution, and that's why you're hearing it so much frequently in the last couple of months, the last year. So just to kind of go into a little bit of a deeper dive, and this is where I kind of want to bring in Dwayne. I have a lot of questions for him, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions that these direct-to-consumer brands have today. So I know brands are wondering if Section 321 can help them save on costs, and whether the savings are enough to make them move their warehouse to Canada or Mexico. So I kind of gave a high level overview of what Section 321 is. And now I kind of want to dive into the weeds a little bit, and hopefully Dwayne can help me out here. So I think the biggest question we often see is, a lot of people hear about Section 321, but Dwayne, is it really for any brand? Like, where are you seeing the most savings, and what kind of verticals out there really get the maximum benefit out of Section 321?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. Origin of product, whether it's Mexico or Canada, countries like Vietnam, China, Cambodia, etc. I mean, all three countries have different agreements with those origins of products. So give an example, if you have highly synthetic apparel coming into the United States, you might be paying 22, 24, 28, 30% tariffs. Canada has a free trade agreement with Vietnam, so customers would come into Canada duty free, and then provided the order is under $800 per day, they would ship duty free into the United States. From a transport perspective, the product is picked up today, no differently than you would do with any other fulfillment, and it's dropped into the U.S. mail stream tonight. Whether it's Mexico or Canada, it's both dropped into the mail stream tonight. The top categories we're seeing: apparel, highly synthetic apparel, women's apparel, shoes, footwear is a big one just based on tariff codes, textiles, pillows, home goods, sporting goods. We're now starting to see an increased ask around food products. FDA clearance now comes into the conversation, but footwear, apparel, etc. I mean, and I think to your point, Jason, this is nothing that is new. I think the pandemic has just accelerated it, and brands are trying to find ways to get more cost competitive. And we all know the supply chain challenges that everybody's faced with.
Yeah, definitely. I know, when I ask you, and if I'm sending you a referral for somebody looking for a warehouse in Canada, I know oftentimes you ask me for HTS codes and what's the country of origin. I know Vietnam and China always get you excited because you can really help brands realize a ton of savings if they manufacture in Vietnam or China. Where it actually, I know you've told me in the past, where it almost makes their fulfillment for free, from the cost savings they're going to realize by shipping from Canada instead of the United States. So I know you touched on a little bit, and the verticals, synthetic apparel, footwear. I know some things that aren't usually under FDA. I think we've seen like things that are prescription, like prescription sunglasses, alcohol, tobacco, like you said, food products under SDA, those usually don't qualify, or you're not seeing a savings under Section 321. So I know the previous administration here in the United States, they added another tariff called Section 301 to Chinese goods, where I think it added another 7.5 to 8% tariff on top of the already high, like 30%. So I think, am I correct in saying that Section 321 that overrides that tariff? So even if you're paying additional tariff, you're still going to see that savings?
Yeah, once again, right? All three countries have different tariffs with all the origin countries, right? So, Mexico has a completely different tariff system with all the origins, US and Canada. So, the additional tariffs under the US agreement has nothing to do with Canada. Canada typically is a flat 18% on the MFN, or most favored nation clause. And then you would do, and if you did have to pay tariffs coming in, you would apply for a duty deferral or a duty drawback process, which you get the goods back, you get the money back either way of some of the countries. So I think, there's just three different countries, three different agreements. We've become through the pandemic, it's almost, you become experts on the different tariffs and different agreements with the different countries, because both Mexico and Canada do a program very similar. And, it's just, I think brands and retailers have heard about this. And now I think it's just, this isn't savings that are not real. This is real tangible money that brands are putting out today. So if you have a brand that's $50 million and we can give you back $2 million to the bottom line, which is to re-engineer, the fulfillment costs really become a wash, because if you produce it fulfilled in the US versus Canada, you still have to fulfill it. It's just pure tangible money that brands can reinvest, remarket, etc.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing a bunch of savings, brands realizing that. So from a customer experience, so I live here in the United States. I order from a brand that's going to ship from Canada. Is there any different experience? Am I going to notice a different experience? And where are some common, kind of explain to me, once the order is picked, you're taking it into the United States in one consolidated shipment?
Yeah. So if you look at the two major centers where this is completed, it's Vancouver and Toronto, right? So if you look at Vancouver, when the orders are picked and packed, and we put a label on the carton, it actually has the U.S. address as the drop point, so that the U.S. consumer, they really get a label that says Jason at 123 Cherry Street, New York, and the origin of the product is 123 Cherry Street in Blaine, Washington. So we drop today into Blaine, we drop into Fife, and then in Toronto, we drop into Buffalo, Akron, Newark, and then sometimes down to the Fort Wayne, Indianapolis area. So it's once I read an article, and it was pre-pandemic, there might have been a couple 5 to 6 trailers that were going across the border, Jason, every day. Today, the rumor is there's 25 to 30 going across the border every day. And that's just Canada into the US. That has nothing to do with what Mexico is into the US. So hopefully that makes sense. But multiple drop points, all the carriers, no real delivery delays, etc.
Yeah, so an order comes into your system, you pick, pack, and ship it that same day, and by the end of the day, it's already ingested into the U.S. carrier stream. And what I've read was that CBP, with Customs and Border Protection, they actually process more than 2 million daily shipments under 321. So they've really become really efficient at processing those. So that way, there's no delays. So a little bit, can you kind of describe like what's the lift? Like, what does it take as far as the lift to get set up? I know, without going into too much detail, because I know with government agencies, there's probably a ton of paperwork, but as far as getting set up as a non-resident importer, like how long does that take from start to finish?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So you have to be set up as an NRI, so non-resident importer. That's, that takes 30 to 60 days. And then typically, and I'm not an accountant, so I'm not going to try to figure out the tax laws, et cetera, but they set up as an NRI. And then we start to begin the process of fulfilling. I think back up a bit, we typically will do a bit of a high level with customers, ask the HS codes, et cetera. We'll quantify the opportunity, and then we work through just as a standard process for picking and packing. But, NRI, typically brands that are already shipping into Canada will be set up as an NRI status, or they might not be, depending on how they're set up in the US. But that is step one, and then kind of move it through the process there.
All right, cool. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Since I know SCI is based in Canada, and oftentimes we have brands coming to us and they're like, hey, what are the, we're thinking of setting up this Section 321 program, and we're looking at Mexico and we're looking at Canada. And they often ask us for our advice on what country makes sense. And I kind of have some ideas around that, but I know you're probably going to have some ideas since SCI is based and has multiple nodes in Canada. Can you tell me why you think Canada is a better place for 321 than Mexico?
Yeah, so great question. So I mean, I never thought sitting here today, I'd be saying that I compete with Mexican 3PLs. Never ever did I
Yeah.
think about that. Being a Canadian 3PL. Here's the big difference. Brands that want, so there's brands in the US that have got to a point where they're ready, or they think they might have saturated or becoming near saturation in their US base, and they want to expand internationally. So they might have aspirations to get to Europe, get to China, get to Australia, et cetera, et cetera. But there's this place north of the border called Canada. And typically brands will dabble in their international experience by going to Canada. Number one, California, New York, it's a short plane ride to get up there to check on the DCs. So the biggest thing we see is they want to expand internationally. If brands are really just looking to take cost out of their business fast and have a really good solution, the providers in Mexico will do that. And so there's different variables. If somebody just wants to be a $50 million company and they don't want to grow internationally, and they just want to carve out X amount of savings, the solution in Mexico is great. If they want to expand internationally and want to start to get outside of the US border, then Canada is the better alternative. That's the big reasons why we see either or.
Yeah, and from what we've seen on our side, with brands coming to us and asking for advice, it's really, we say the same exact thing, right? The Canadian market is 10% the size of the US market. Yep. Toronto looks a lot like New York, right? Canada looks a lot like the US. So if you're planning an expansion for your brand, the first logical step is always Canada. And having a warehouse in Canada, and then maybe even a .ca domain, your .com domain, then a .ca domain, it just makes sense. It's a much better experience for that Canadian customer to buy something from a .ca domain and from a warehouse that's going to ship,
Yep.
from Canada. We all know that. I think, and Dwayne, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think 80% of the population in Canada lives within 1 day carrier from Toronto. So, it really leads for a great experience. And then having, SCI having a node in Vancouver and also in Toronto, it just makes sense that would be the first expansion. Yeah. Also, we see, sometimes Vancouver's an easy port to get into, and I think with Mexico, sometimes where we've seen a little bit of a drawback is, going from Tijuana, which is where most of the 3PLs in Mexico are, to the East Coast of the United States can be, quite a travel. And we do see like increased transit time. So sometimes it just makes sense. And like you said, if you're looking for just a pure cost savings, Mexico might be your solution. But if you're looking for that international expansion, Canada probably makes some sense. So kind of to summarize, I think we've said, once you get the government registries and licenses out of the way, which could take 60 to 90 days, since Channel Ape has that pre-built connector to SCI's warehouse management system, usually in utilizing our Section 321 playbook, usually we can onboard a new customer in 30 days or so, once all that government stuff is out of the way.
Correct. And I think, yeah, the integration sits on the back of our Manhattan platform. We set up the customers on the inbound with our system to track all the inbound HS codes. To your point, Jason, once we push it through Channel Ape, and then we push it back electronically to a manifest to the border, and it's cleared electronically. So to our customer, to the consumer who's buying off the brand, they know no different. And a lot of our customers now have said, we don't even know it's really in Canada, our DC anymore. All we know is that we're pushing out a significant amount of savings to the business. And like I said, right, they can reinvest that money to new product, new channels, et cetera. So it's really built, it's seamless, either Mexico or Canada. And it is the hottest topic we're talking about.
Yeah, I have one question for you, and then we'll kind of transition to the return piece and the reverse logistics. So my last question for you, Dwayne, is, and we get this a lot from brands, is a lot of the direct to consumer brands we're seeing as they mature, they started out as digitally native vertical brands, direct to consumer, but we're seeing they're all starting to add some B2B component, whether they're selling to Macy's or Nordstrom's or small mom and pop retailers. We know those orders are going to be greater than $800, so they're not going to ship under de minimis. What are you seeing brands do as far as like B2B? So say, for example, they wanted to ship to Nordstrom or Macy's or Target. Are they still bringing those goods into Canada, or do you have another solution for that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because it is happening, and what we have seen is some customers, depending on how big they are. So we see some customers call it 20 to 40 million. How they might want to keep it all in Canada. They'll pay the duties depending on if the wholesaler is a pickup at a distribution point, which would be like Buffalo or Blaine, or others, if it's full container work, they'll ship it into the US into a 3PL like Darnit, and it'll be fulfilled that way. So I think, Jason, it all depends on volume, etc. I think where all this 321, the benefits are, it's an e-com play. But we are seeing brands that do bring in some B2B, and they, as I said, they'll either bring it into us, they'll pay duties when it crosses the border because they don't know the determined order if they bring a wholesaler on, so they'd rather keep it in Canada and try to push it e-com. Or if it's a full container, they push it into like a 3PL like Darnit, and they would fulfill it at that point, depending on the rules with the B2B provider.
Yeah, awesome. Great insight there. So that kind of brings me to my next topic and reverse logistics flow under Section 321. And this is where I really want to bring in Darnit here, as they do a lot of reverse logistics and returns. So we all know that returns are a key component of the sales cycle. Section 321, reverse logistics can function, pretty much the same way it does now if your goods, as if you ship the goods from the United States. Brands can utilize a returns platform that's integrated with their Shopify shopping cart, such as Loop, Returnly, Happy Returns, one of those to facilitate the return process. And then returns coming from the United States are usually consolidated at the border and then sent back to the Canadian or Mexican warehouse for processing, right? Returns are usually not a super high priority for some of those facilities, and that process can take weeks and also be expensive when you start thinking about the cost it's going to be from going from the United States back to Canada or Mexico. And many times those returns we're seeing they're being disposed of anyway. So it's really a blocker, and this is kind of why we brought in Darnit into the process. What we've seen with the reverse logistics flow when it's going back to Canada or Mexico, right? There's an increased carbon footprint, on the shipping. There's long transit times, increased freight costs, and like I said, a lot of times those returns will be ultimately donated or destroyed. So bringing in Darnit, Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about, where you're located in the United States and a little bit about your services and some of the services you offer to those direct-to-consumer brands? And then we'll hit on a little bit how everything all works together under Section 321.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. So we're located in Massachusetts. We are, as I mentioned before, full-fledged refurbishment and fulfillment centers. So what does that mean for you when it comes to returns? Well, the beauty of it is that we are able to take your returns, and then our refurbishment department get those garments, for the most part, a good percentage of them, back to saleable form, whether they're wrinkled, whether they're stained, whether they have deodorant on, in the armpits from someone trying it on, or sometimes people like to let their cats sleep in the garment before they decide to return it. So we're able to delint those and take them in and refurbish them as well. So the beauty about working with someone like us is that we can take those returns that you've shipped to the folks in the United States, refurbish them with the hope that we can get those into first quality, and then do one of two things: either send them back to your distribution center, or we can then put them here in our system in our warehouse management system that we have connected with someone like Jason or another returns software, and then put them into stock here, and then connect through Jason to be able to pick these items that are sitting here in our facility. So you don't have to spend that extra money shipping them all over the country or back to Canada or Mexico. So the process is that we receive the individual returns from your customer. We open them, we assess. First, we figure out if they sent back exactly what they told you they sent back. We verify that, and then we'll inspect each and every one of those items. And we'll either send it through refurbishment or we'll damage it out and send, and that'll be part of that report for that record. So that's the quick overview of the process, but the beauty of having both our departments under one roof is that we can handle a lot of those little issues that can help salvage a lot of these garments back to first quality. It might be a simple side seam that was open that would just happen to be missed in production, and we can just put a quick stitch on and get you full price for that garment, as opposed to having you discard that and throw it away. That makes sense, Jason?
Yeah, Jeff, it's not even stitching. We've seen brands just, they have a certain way that things need to be folded and put into a poly bag to make sure it looks like unworn and brand new quality. And then when these items come back to the warehouse just doesn't have the labor force to refold that in the perfect condition to put it back in a poly bag. And these brands are just donating or destroying these items. So you guys can do something like that as well, where it's just refold it and put it back into a poly bag and maybe put a re-tag or something like that.
That's correct. We do have a little over 80 people in the building, so we can shift gears. A lot of people are cross-trained on the different tasks that we have in the building, so we can do that. Every customer is different. So if you have a specific way that you fold a turtleneck and the other customer has a different way of folding a turtleneck and packing it, well, we'll comply to your regulations and your routing guides and so forth to make sure that your customer is getting that same product the same way that you presented it to them the first time. So they don't know. The goal is not to let them know that it was returned, refurbished, or even touched by anyone else.
Got it. Yeah, so really, with Channel 8 Section 321 playbook, it really allows returns to be processed much quicker and being sent to a facility like Darnit that's really adept at handling high volume returns and refurbishment of goods, right, Jeff? You probably see what's the average return rate for apparel brands these days?
We actually have a customer that's very low, but most of them are in the mid-20s.
Yeah.
I think that's the average is around 27, which is scary, but that's what we see a lot of. But we do have a few customers a lot lower than that.
Yeah.
That's about the rate.
Yeah, and I think under Section 321, I think what the value the brands are seeing is using like a decision engine like Channel 8 and an order orchestration and order management system. Instead of sending that return back, right, we're sending it back to Darnit where you can process it, rehab, refurb, and then get it back into a resellable condition really fast, right? And then what happens is Channel 8's platform can act as that decision-making engine where we can determine where that order is going to be shipped from, right? We're pulling an inventory from your warehouse. If that order comes in and you have it in stock and you're closer than Dwayne is in Toronto or Vancouver, then our order management system is going to go ahead and ship it from your facility. So really what that allows for is really for that brand to kind of realize some cash and make some money on that return, where normally, especially if it has seasonality, right? We've seen that where returns take a long time, and then by the time they get back into a resellable condition, it's December and it's, a pair of swim trunks that are no longer being sold or, out of favor. So really makes sense and to have somebody in the United States to handle that high volume of returns. So the next part I want to get into, real world examples of some of these cost savings. Dwayne and I have been talking about this and what brands can save. So I have an example here of a pair of shoes that cost $95 retail, we know the cost of the shoe wholesale is $30. The United States duty rate, right? This sneaker is made from synthetic materials. It's made in China. So we're looking at a 35% duty rate coming into the United States. We're looking at, probably in Canada, 18%. But like Dwayne said, that's going to be repaid, once that order is shipped into the United States. Shipping cost, it's a little bit more expensive from Canada. You're probably looking at $10 a unit, whereas in the US, you might be at $6 a unit. So that's the kind of example that we're using. And then I'll kind of show you some of the savings from there. So we're looking at, the duty save, we're looking at $30, which is 35%. So we're looking at about $10 a unit. And then we know that shipping might be a little bit more once we include, some of these 321 manifesting fees. And then also, the cost it's going to be to take it from Toronto to Buffalo. So we're still looking at about $7 a unit, on a $95 pair of shoes retail. So we're looking at $7 a unit savings. So Dwayne, I don't know if that's what you've seen typically from some of your 321 customers. Are you seeing more savings than that, or is that about average?
It really, I think there's a couple things here, right? So number one, people have to invest a bit of time to dig into, some of the detail. Because I think, is it the savings? Yeah, it's typical. I think when you get into the HTS codes and look underneath it, you do a little bit of the work to figure out what the savings is. So I would say it's probably low based on some of the other customers we've seen, because it really depends on product type and country of origin. What we're also starting to see is we've seen other customers now say, okay, so it's 18% in China and it's 32% in Vietnam. But if I come into Canada, I know my manufacturer also has a plant in Vietnam, so I could shift my China manufacturing over to Vietnam. So we're starting to see this as brands get these businesses stood up in Canada. They're now starting to shift manufacturing, Jason, because to your point, you still get the 18% back, but now they're saying, well, I'm just going to push it all to Vietnam. And then I get complete duty free and I don't have to put any cash out from a duty drawback.
Yeah, it's amazing where we're starting to see that on our side as well, where brands are starting to move manufacturing to different countries to really take advantage of Section 321 savings. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So my next slide is just kind of a high level process review. And then what we'll do is we do have some questions. So I'll jump into some question and answer session. So really from a high level, it all starts, like Dwayne said, figuring out your HTS codes, your country of manufacture, what your duty rate is currently in the US, and then, figuring out what your duty rate is going to be in Canada. Something that Dwayne can help anybody with. I email him all the time asking about duty rates. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what your exact duty rate is depending on what nation you're manufacturing in. So that's stuff that your warehouse provider can definitely help with. So high level, your goods are manufactured in Asia, China, Vietnam. You're sending those goods from there. Instead of the US, you're sending it to Canada, right? Into Vancouver, into Toronto. It gets ingested into your warehouse there. Order comes from Shopify, your shopping cart, whether it's Shopify or something else. The order comes into ChannelApe system. ChannelApe, the order management system, determines where that order is going to ship from. If that order is in resellable condition at Darnit, we're going to route the order there. If it's maybe on the East Coast and close to a customer, if it's closer to ship it from Vancouver, then that's where we're going to ship it from. All that's handled, right? All the data that the warehouse needs to file that commercial invoice and that Section 321 manifest, it's all in our system, right? So we're sending it to the warehouse. They're doing the whole manifest, and it's already being electronically submitted to customs. From there, end of the day, Dwayne and SCI They take all the orders, consolidate them into one big shipment, ingest them somewhere in the United States, and now they're in the carrier stream, right? Now they go back, they hit your customer loves it. It came, within a day or two, no issues, right? Deal is done. If they have to have a return, instead of sending it back to Canada or Mexico, we can easily route that return back to Jeff and Adam at Darnit. They process it, they refold it, they steam it, they clean it, they make it look perfect. Now it's in their inventory, and then the whole process starts over again. So really, and the kind of glue that puts all this together, shameful plug here, but it's Channel Leap's distributed order management system and real-time inventory management modules really are relaying those orders to the warehouse with stock. Usually it's the closest to the customer. Really complex set of algorithms really determines where the account is available, the origin, and then the destination zip codes, weights, split shipping rules, and then carrier SLAs as well. So all that kind of works together. Really a seamless process. I know brands, really get stuck on it seems like it's a big process to get started with, but when you actually look at it, it's pretty simple to get off the ground. So Dwayne, Adam, Jeff, anything to add there?
The only thing I would questions. The only thing I would add before we get to questions, so bit of history here. Before we were shipping it back to Canada, the returns. And, I think that process led to a bad consumer experience from a returns perspective, and also left our customers with a slower ability to resell that product. So, enhancing the system and this with the folks at Darnit, it does provide a, not only a seamless returns process, but it also does provide the opportunity, if it does get to a B2B down the road, as you had asked, Jason, it does already have that solution built in as well.
Awesome. Let me jump. We do have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to jump to our Q&A slide. I'll start with this one, pretty easy. Recommended 3PL partners in Canada who specialize in 321. I think so you can go ahead and, what your website address and maybe your locations in Canada.
So I assume that was for me. So so it's so brief email, dwayne.johnson@sci.ca. So just like the movie star.johnson@sci.ca. Our business is 30 odd DCs across the country. So whoever asked that question, more than willing to have a discussion and see if we can help you. And if you do need further, let us know and we'll see if we can help.
All right, awesome. Can we call you the Rock on our future calls?
Exactly. So
so another question for you, and you probably know this being in Canada. We have a question asking about supply chain issues and port congestion. We know that was a big issue this year in Long Beach and some of the ports here in the United States. Are the Canadian ports ready to handle like all this increased flow of traffic? I know most items come into Vancouver or ports around Toronto.
I mean, the ports are getting better. I think it's a fair statement across North America. We've seen, we had congestion problems, especially when the floods were on in Vancouver, but we're seeing, the St. Lawrence becoming another gateway down through Montreal. So I would say the congestion is getting better. There's 2 or 3 main ways to get into the Vancouver ports. I think most people just assume I'm going to go into Vancouver, but there is other ways in. So, I think it's getting better. It's not perfect at all, but I don't know when it'll be perfect, but it is getting better.
Yeah. And then what we've seen is coming from Asia, we've seen most brands will use a port in Vancouver, and then if they're shipping from Toronto, what do? Just rail those goods across Canada and into Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, typically when brands set up in Canada, they typically will rail it across to Toronto because on proximity and Mississippi, which typically is for a lot of the cases. We have seen other customers set up in Vancouver and then eventually go to a Toronto DC as well. But people will go to Toronto, just rail it right across. And that's really the, kind of the work we have to do to figure out where the best DC, best location is based on current case in the US, as well as if they extend to Canada.
Yeah, I know we've worked with some mutual customers where we're using distributor order management and shipping from both Vancouver and Toronto, and our system determines the logic of where that order is going to ship from. So it really makes for a great customer experience.
Yep.
So is it I have a question here. Using Section 321, is next day delivery still achievable?
Yeah, we do it today. So there's two ways. So I always ask customers there's a couple of different things. Number one, do you have 2 DCs in the US? Number two, what's the percentage of next day deliveries? Because it's a great ask, but I always say, what is the percentage? Because there's a couple of different things that our customers have done. They sometimes will reroute that to a US DC. They will also ship it directly out of Toronto into the US location. And so they won't use the line haul, typical line haul into the US. So yes, it's available. I always ask, what's the percentage? And let's talk about what the ideas are. Because as we all know in supply chain, nothing is easy. And so we have to do a little bit of the work to figure out what the best option is.
I think I'm going to bring in Jeff here. So I think what we've seen a lot of times for this next day delivery model is kind of this hub and spoke, right? So, SCI can have all the inventory, and then Jeff at Darnit can kind of have best sellers, right? And then our OMS can determine the logic of where that order is going to ship from. If it comes in next day delivery, then we can route that to Darnit. So Jeff, do you have those next day delivery capabilities there in Massachusetts?
Absolutely, and that's what we do now. And the beauty of working with Channel 8 is you guys can have that information flow, to us or to Canada, depending on where the product is. It makes no difference. The customer would never know where it's coming from or how it got there, as long as it gets there on time.
Yeah, awesome. Somebody asked how to spell Darnit, but they found it. So your website is darnit.com, correct?
Darnit.com, that's it.
Yeah. Next question I have, and we hear this pretty often, is there a limit on a number of SKUs that anybody here can handle, right? So I know I'll start with Channel 8. I think really where we see the benefits of Channel 8 is really with high SKU apparel footwear brands, right? Because of our real-time inventory management system, I think those are the brands that really struggle with managing inventory, is those high SKU count brands. Most of our brands have 700, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 SKUs. I think we're not a huge help is when that brand has 2 or 3 products and doesn't really have high SKU count and doesn't really have that issue with managing inventory in real time. So Dwayne, Jeff, Adam, your facilities, if an apparel brand comes and they're shipping from China and it comes in poly bags, do you guys have any limits on the amount of SKUs that they can store at your warehouses?
So we today run, I can't give the exact number. We run anywhere from 600 to 800,000 SKUs across the network. So, we have some customers who, have 50 SKUs and they're 3,000 square feet running, $1 million in e-com, or we have other customers who have 30,000 SKUs across 40,000 feet. So ours come in all walks and sizes, Jason, because then we kind of apply some automation with our 6 Rivers technology or some of our pick lights. So we don't get too picky on the SKUs. We do want to understand, what the growth is. We're seeing, lots of e-com, huge hyper growth e-com companies that, as I've always said, need to take cost out and they might not be able to scale in their current situation.
Adam?
Yeah, and much like Dwayne, same thing applies here. We have customers from 5 SKUs up to customers with 20, 30,000 SKUs. So we don't have any processes where the SKU count will really affect us on our end, as long as we can get it out to their customers as quickly and painlessly as possible.
Wow, 30,000 SKUs, that's a lot to manage for one customer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. There's a question, is there any add-on with Shopify that automatically fills out the 321 forms for crossing goods into the US from Canada? So I don't think there is. I know that Shopify has some capabilities coming out shortly where they're going to have the ability to add HTS codes in the back end of Shopify. But right now with Channel8, what we do is we have all that data in our system. We have the retail cost, the wholesale cost, the HTS codes. So when an order comes in, we're transmitting all that data to the WMS system of the warehouse. So Dwayne and Jeff and Adam, in their WMS system, they're getting all that data they need to fill out that commercial invoice before that good is actually sent to CBP. That's what really makes the whole process run really quick, is having all that data pre-filled out, so that way when it hits customs and border, it just automatically goes right across and it doesn't get held up.
Right. And I think the point here is this is all done electronically, right? So there's no, I think we all possibly went to the post office once in our lives to ship a product into a different country, and you had to fill out 4 pages of info and 3 different layers. So this is all done electronically. And so to number one, to the brand or the retailer, no additional work. Number 2, to the warehousing, we always view this as it's just another order that goes into another Gaylord and another courier company comes up. So there's no additional process on our side. It's set up, as you said, Jason, but Channel8 gives it to us, which is integrate. Our Channel8's integrated into our Manhattan system, and the processing all flows.
Cool. Last question. I know we have about 6 minutes left, so I don't know, Dwayne, this question's for you. I don't know how much detail you're going to be able to get into, but the question is, can you run us through the duty drawback process in detail? Is SCI handling it, or does the brand customer handle that duty drawback process?
Yeah, so there's 2 types of ways to get, there's a duty drawback and there's a duty deferral. So duty deferral is a process where if you're set up in Canada and you're already shipping into Canada, a duty deferral is exactly that. You don't pay duties at all, depending on the origin of country at a high level. And you have about 4 years to sell those products and use a deferral code. From a drawback perspective, we're not a broker, but we have partners that we use. But at the same time, our brands that we do business with today, they typically have a broker, and their broker can help them with the drawback process. So drawbacks can be determined on any different timeline, depending on the value of goods, depending on the orders per day, etc. We have a mapped out process that we've done for other customers with brokers, which we can absolutely go through with people. But it's done today. We have a schematic. We've actually done some work with the Canadian Customs and Border. As from a filing perspective, we actually met with them. So the process is not tedious. We've done work with other customers where we do the first 3 or 4 with them, and then they have a supply chain analyst or manager that completes after that. So more than welcome to have a conversation to walk through the grids, but it's not a long drawn out process. The thing is, it's on the setup with Channel8 and us to get the proper reporting, etc. It can be attached when you submit the drawback.
And I think the drawback all gone to electronic forms now. I know Canada was moving towards that.
Yeah, once again, right? We're not asking people to fill out a whole bunch of things and put it in the mail. It's all done electronically. But I mean, this is there's different providers out there today that do this, or the brands or retailers, current brokers, or us, we can help out because we have a couple of brokers that do as well.
Yeah. And then the last question we probably have time for is, does Mexico have the same free trade agreements with China and Vietnam that Canada does?
Yeah. So here's what I know about and Jason, the Mexican free trade agreements are similar. They have different rules and regulations based on countries of origin. And then I think the providers in Mexico also have some sort of agreements they do with the brands as part of the opportunity and the savings that that is here by the brand. So similar but different, but same concept. And as I said, people want a real cheap solution that costs less. Mexico is an absolute good option. If people want to expand international, then Canada is the logical next step to growth.
Yeah, and I really think it comes down to I look at all these HTS codes and trade agreements, and really a lot of things change on a yearly basis. So it really depends on what country it's coming from and then where it's going. And then also it really depends, Dwayne, you can kind of back me up on this one, but not only what the apparel is or what the garments are or what the vertical, but what it's actually made out of, whether it's man-made material, synthetic material, it really depends on, and that's why those HTS codes are so important. So the best thing to probably do is just to reach out to Dwayne in Canada or a 3PL provider in Mexico and really ask them, here's my HTS code, here's my country of origin, what does a free trade agreement look like, and here's a vertical I sell in, right? I know even with Mexico, apparel is great, footwear is totally different in Mexico, and you need different agreements and different registrations to get footwear into Mexico to be able to ship out to the United States. So really, really complicated, but that's why we're all here. We're kind of experts in this section 321 and been working with it for a long time. So that kind of puts us right at 2 o'clock. So right at the end of our webinar. Guys, I can't thank you enough. Adam, Dwayne, Jeff. Once again, Adam and Jeff from Darnit, and then Dwayne from SCI in Canada. And Steve here, I didn't even introduce Steve, but he's our product marketing guru at Channel 8. So really, guys, thanks a lot for being a part of this webinar. And I hope that, we had some great participants and a lot of great questions. And I hope everybody really learned a lot from our webinar today. So like I said, this is the first one in the Channel 8 series. So we're looking on doing a lot more and really coming out and educating those direct to consumer brands on all things supply chain. So thanks everybody. And if anybody wants to reach out, channel8.com, darnit.com, and Dwayne, your SCI group.
SCI.ca.
SCI.ca.
Yep.
All right. Thanks everybody.